There's something magnetic about a person who truly listens. Not the kind of listening that waits for a pause just to talk again, but the kind that silences the ego, softens the gaze, and turns the world's noise into stillness for you. That kind of attention, it's unforgettable. It reaches into the quiet ache of the human soul and whispers, "You matter. I see you. You're not alone." Most people move through life desperate to be interesting, to be noticed, to be validated. But what if the path to being unforgettable wasn't in making people look at you, but in making people feel seen by you? Be so genuinely interested, they can't ignore you. Because interest, real interest, is rare. It requires more than hearing, it demands presence. It's not about compliments, it's about connection. It's not about reacting, it's about receiving. And when you show up with that kind of heart, with that kind of attention, something opens in people. Walls crumble, faces soften, truth finds its way to the surface. And they remember you not as the loudest in the room, but as the safest. Dale Carnegie understood this, that if you want to win people, you don't need a better story. You need to care about theirs. That the greatest influence doesn't come from dominating the conversation, it comes from holding space for others to reveal themselves. Never trust the people who tell you other people's secrets, but always trust the ones who remember your silence without needing to fill it. That's the difference between presence and performance. The world teaches us to perform, but souls are not changed through performance, they are changed through presence. And presence begins with genuine interest. Noticing the way someone fidgets when they're afraid. Remembering what someone said 3 weeks ago, in passing, and bringing it up with care. Asking a question not to sound wise, but to understand. That's the kind of interest that disarms, that melts defenses, that makes you unforgettable without saying a word about yourself. Because here's the truth. People are not desperate to meet someone extraordinary. They are desperate to feel that they are not ordinary. So be the mirror that shows them their worth. Be the space where their story matters. Be the presence that reminds them who they were before the world made them doubt it. And ironically, when you stop trying to be interesting, you become magnetic. When you stop trying to impress, you leave an impression. When you stop talking about yourself, people start talking about you because you gave them something no one else did, themselves. Be so genuinely interested that they feel seen. Be so genuinely interested that their masks fall off without you having to ask. Be so genuinely interested that your name becomes synonymous with, "That's the first time I felt safe." Because success hugs you in private, but legacy is carved into the people who remember how you made them feel when they thought they didn't matter. And to do that, you must forget yourself for a moment. You must be willing to step aside and let their world become more important than your performance. You must be willing to abandon the script and enter the silence. You must care so deeply that your stillness says what your words never could. I'm here, fully, with you. For you. Our thoughts make us what we are. And if your thoughts are always about yourself, your presence will always feel heavy. But if your thoughts are for others, your presence becomes light. It becomes a relief. It becomes a sanctuary in a world that never stops performing. Don't be the person who's remembered for having the best advice. Be the person who's remembered for being the best listener. Don't be remembered for your credentials. Be remembered for your compassion. Don't be remembered for the image you tried to uphold. Be remembered for the walls you helped others lay down. And when you live this way, when you show up not to be interesting but to carry you, become a leader, not by title, but by presence. You become the person people turn to, not because you always have the answers, but because you never make them feel small for asking. So speak with your eyes, listen with your soul, ask questions that open hearts, Be the interruption in their day that turns the mundane into meaning. Because in the end, no one forgets the person who made them feel important, not because of status, not because of charm, but because of the radical rarity of genuine interest. Be so genuinely interested, they can't ignore you. Because when you give someone your sincere, undivided interest, you do something the world rarely does. You give without agenda. You offer without demand. You bring attention not as currency, but as a gift. And people feel that. Even if they don't have the language for it, they know something just shifted. They walk away from you and feel fuller, calmer, understood. And maybe for the first time in a long time real. The world is starving for authenticity, drowning in performance, choked by surface-level interactions. And in that ocean of noise, your quiet care becomes thunder. Your thoughtful presence becomes power. Your interest, genuine, pure, unscripted, becomes a revolution. Be so genuinely interested, they can't ignore you, not because your interest flatters them, but because it heals something unspoken. Because when you care deeply, you touch the parts of people that are still waiting to be acknowledged. Not just the successful part, not just the curated part, but the messy, uncertain, trembling part that most are too afraid to show. And when you look into that part, not to fix it, not to diagnose it, but to hold it with your attention, you become unforgettable. You want to lead? Start by listening. You want to influence? Start by feeling. You want to build real trust? Stop trying to be seen and start seeing. Because nothing will ever compete with the power of someone who remembers your name, your story, your struggle, not out of obligation, but out of respect. We've grown used to being looked through, being half heard, being replied to with one eye still on the phone. So when you enter a conversation and turn the world off, when you place your whole presence in the palm of a single moment, you don't just stand out, you change the temperature of the room. You become the person people crave when they're tired of noise. You become the memory people return to when they've forgotten who they are. You become the one who sat with them, not above, not ahead, not behind, but beside. And isn't that what we all long for? To be met, not judged. To be known, not fixed. To be heard, not edited. You can't fake that kind of interest. It comes from a place inside you that has tasted the pain of being unseen. It comes from your own scars, your own quiet prayers, your own nights where you just needed someone to care enough to notice. So now you notice. Now you slow down. Now you care, not because it earns you points, but because it's who you are. You've become what you once needed, and the world feels it. And yes, there will be people who mistake your interest for weakness. Let them. They've not yet learned that the strongest person in the room is the one who can give without fear, who can love without leverage, who can listen without trying to dominate. Because giving genuine attention requires a kind of power that cannot be taught, it must be earned in silence. Success hugs you in private. Failure slaps you in public. But the person who made you feel important, you never forget them. You carry their name like a soft echo in the quiet moments of your life. You measure other relationships by how deeply they saw you. You feel the absence of that kind of presence in everyone who cannot match it. Be that presence. Be so genuinely interested that your questions open locked doors, that your listening becomes therapy, that your care breaks patterns. Because when you make people feel important, they rise, they soften, they remember, they trust, and they remember you, not as the hero, not as the fixer, but as the rare one who didn't try to be amazing, who just tried to be real. So become interested in others, not just in what they do, but in who they are when they're not performing. Ask how their heart is, not just how their day was. Remember the names of their dreams. Ask about the thing they thought no one would care about. See them beyond their usefulness. Be the first person who looks beyond their role, their resume, their image, and sees the human standing quietly beneath it all. And when you do that, when you show up in a world addicted to self-promotion and offer curiosity, empathy, presence, you'll never have to demand attention again. They will feel you. They will trust you. They will talk about you when you're not in the room, because they'll be telling the story of the one person who made them feel whole again. Be so genuinely interested, they can't ignore you. Not because you need the credit, but because they needed the connection, and you gave it. And if you keep going, if you make this your way of living, not just your way of interacting, you'll begin to notice something remarkable. People begin to open around you. They start to share things they've never shared. Not because you pried, but because you proved you could hold what they revealed. The safety of your interest, the warmth of your attention becomes a kind of gravity. They orbit it not out of need, but out of trust. You don't have to be the most brilliant person in the room to be remembered. You just have to be the one who cared the most. Care without spectacle, without performance. Care so deeply that even when you're silent, people feel your presence anchoring the room. Genuine interest is one of the most disarming forms of power you'll ever wield. It strips away pretense. It dismantles pride. It makes the walls people have built over years fall in minutes because someone finally showed up without a hammer, but with open hands. You see, anyone can charm. Anyone can impress for a moment, but few can connect. Fewer still can connect without ulterior motives. And the rarest of all are those who connect and then disappear, not needing applause, not needing reciprocation, because the act of connection was enough. Be that rare soul. Ask not to extract, but to understand. Compliment not to manipulate, but to uplift. Remember details not to score points, but because you truly care. Let people talk without feeling corrected. Let people share without feeling small. Let people feel safe in your presence, not because you agree with everything they say, but because you never made them feel less for saying it. That kind of presence lingers. It lingers in the pause before they speak to someone new. It lingers in the choice to reach out again. It lingers when they're unsure, afraid, uncertain, and they remember you. Because you didn't try to fix them. You didn't rush them. You just saw them. And that seeing, that sacred act of soul recognition, becomes a moment they carry forever. It is easy to love the polished. Easy to be curious about the impressive. But when you show interest in the quiet places, when you show kindness to the forgotten corners of someone's life, that's where real transformation begins. Most people are not starving for answers. They're starving to be understood. And when you become the person who seeks to understand first before advising, before assuming, before interpreting, you step into a level of leadership the world desperately needs. Because leadership without empathy is tyranny. Influence without curiosity is manipulation. And power without presence is poison. So return to the foundation. Care. Not once. Not when it's convenient. Not when it earns you something. But consistently. Quietly. Genuinely. Care enough to look people in the eye when they speak. Care enough to ask how they really are. Care enough to sit in the discomfort of someone else's pain without needing to fix it. Care enough to follow up when there's nothing to gain. And you will become unforgettable. You'll become the reference point for what trust feels like. You'll become the example someone uses when explaining what true kindness looks like. You'll become the soul who asked the right question at the right moment and changed the course of someone's entire life, not by force, but by interest. Because when someone feels you are interested in them, not in their image, but in their essence, they begin to believe they are worthy of that interest. And that belief is healing. It rewrites stories. It repairs shame. It rebirths identity. That is the hidden power of genuine interest. It doesn't just connect you to others. It resurrects something within them. So speak less, ask more, assume less, wonder more, defend less, listen more, and in doing so, you become a sanctuary, a living reminder that even in a loud, distracted world, someone can still choose to care, and people will never forget it. Not because you made the best argument, not because you had the best resume, but because in a moment when they forgot they mattered, you remembered for them. Be so genuinely interested they can't ignore you. Because love is not loud, presence is not proud, and the people who change the world are often the ones who sit quietly beside you until you remember who you are. And if you continue down this path where curiosity replaces judgment, where stillness replaces spectacle, where sincerity replaces strategy, you'll begin to notice another shift. The people who once felt unreachable begin to open. The ones who seemed cold begin to thaw. Even the hardest faces soften when they feel they are seen not as problems to be solved, but as humans to be understood. You will speak less, and yet you will say more, because the depth of your silence, when rooted in care, becomes louder than the noisiest charisma. Most try to impress with their knowledge, but you will impress with your presence. And that kind of presence anchored, grounded, undistracted is priceless in a world addicted to performance. It's not found in technique, it's not in a book, it's cultivated in the quiet practice of truly showing up. And it begins with one question whispered within you every time you enter a room, every time you meet a stranger, every time you sit beside someone in pain. Can I make them feel important right now? Not flattered, not entertained. Important. Important because they exist. Important because they feel. Important because someone finally stopped waiting for them to become impressive and simply cared about who they are now. This question becomes your compass. Not, how do I win them over? Not, what should I say to stand out? Just this, how do I see them in a way that reminds them they matter? And once you begin to live this way, you'll realize the more people you truly see, the more deeply you begin to see yourself. Because your ability to hold space for others is directly tied to your willingness to face the unseen parts of your own soul, the places you ignored, the insecurities you buried, the fears you masked with performance. When you stop running from those parts within you, you become safe enough for others to stop running too. And in that moment when you are no longer trying to be interesting, but simply trying to connect, you discover the truest kind of influence. The kind that doesn't need a title. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that doesn't fade when the spotlight dims. So speak less. Show up more. Ask deeper questions. Let people take their time. Let them unfold. Let them not know what to say. Hold the awkward silence with grace. Because silence, too, is a language. And sometimes, silence is the only space sacred enough for the soul to speak. You don't need to rush to fill the air. Just breathe with them. You don't need to be profound. Just be present. You don't need to fix anything. You only need to honor it. And in doing so, you become the rarest kind of person. The kind who doesn't chase the spotlight, but becomes the light that others gather around. Not because you shone brighter, but because you reminded them they have light, too. Be so genuinely interested, they can't ignore you. Not because your voice echoed in their ears, but because your heart echoed in their life. Because when you become the kind of person who truly listens, who listens not with the ears, but with the soul, you stop chasing influence and start embodying it. You stop fighting to be heard and begin to resonate without words. You become unforgettable, not because you are louder than the rest, but because you saw what others refused to look at, and you treated it with reverence. It's one thing to be liked, it's another to be safe. People crave safety far more than they crave charm, and the person who makes others feel safe without trying to impress them, that person is remembered forever. Because we don't remember people for their perfection. We remember them for how they made us feel when we were unsure, when we were vulnerable, when we were breaking. We remember the one who didn't flinch at our mess, didn't judge our doubt, didn't look away from our truth. That's the kind of presence that comes from genuine interest. When your attention is no longer transactional, when your curiosity is no longer performance, when your care doesn't need to be seen to be real, you unlock a power that has no competition. The more deeply you pay attention to others, the more deeply you learn about yourself. You begin to recognize that behind every face is a storm of emotions, a war of thoughts, a library of memories no one else has read. And still you choose to show up with grace, with empathy, with interest. You choose to see the humanity before the opinions, the heart before the argument, the story before the mistake. That is what makes you magnetic. That is what makes you unforgettable. You become the one person who doesn't just hear others, but honors them. And honoring someone is more powerful than any compliment could ever be. Compliments can flatter, but attention, presence, that heals. To be present is to say with your silence, I value you enough to stop everything else for you. I value you enough to quiet my own mind, to make room for your voice. I value you enough to see beyond what you show the world. And you don't have to say these things out loud. People feel them. They sense the difference between being heard and being understood, between being pitied and being respected, between being noticed and being held. That's the difference you bring. So speak less, but with more soul. When you do speak, let it be with precision and love. Let every word be a thread that stitches people back together. Let your silence carry more comfort than 100 speeches. And let your presence remind people that not all love needs to be loud. In a world of endless talking, become the calm that makes others lean in. Become the rare one who says little but means much, who asks questions that open hearts, who hears what wasn't said, who makes people feel like they're the only one in the room, because in that moment, they are. And when people feel that, they don't forget you, not because you tried to be remembered, but because you allowed them to remember themselves. And when you live this way long enough, when your interest in others becomes less of a tactic and more of your nature, you begin to attract something money cannot buy and charisma cannot fake. Trust. Quiet, sacred, invisible trust. The kind that forms slowly, like dew at dawn. The kind that cannot be asked for, only earned. Because trust isn't built in the moments when everything is smooth. Trust is born in the pauses, in the restraint, in the way you do not interrupt, in the way your eyes don't wander when they speak, in the way you don't try to finish their story or fix their pain, you simply stay. And staying, in this world, is rare. People are used to being abandoned mid-sentence. They're used to feeling like a burden if they share too much. They're used to apologies with eyes glued to the screen. They're used to shallow interest, fleeting praise, and masked agendas. But when you stay, when you hold the moment like it's holy, when you remain, even when the words are messy, when you listen without preparing your reply, you become sacred to them. Not for your advice, not for your brilliance, but for your presence. Dale Carnegie knew this. The deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. And appreciation is not merely spoken, it is shown in time, in patience, in remembering the little things that everyone else forgets. when you recall someone's child's name, when you follow up on the thing they mentioned in passing, when you make space for their sorrow without treating it like an inconvenience. That's what builds your legacy. Because in the end, we are not remembered by how loud we were. We are remembered by how deeply we made others feel seen. We are not remembered for dominating a room, but for transforming the space around us quietly, steadily, with kindness that asked for nothing in return. So, keep showing up with fewer words and more depth. Let others speak first. Let others reveal themselves without fear. And when it is your turn to talk, let your words carry the weight of someone who has truly listened. Because only those who listen with empathy can speak with influence. Only those who pause for others can lead them anywhere worth going. And only those who care without spectacle can earn hearts without resistance. And if you ever doubt the power of your silence, remember this: the most influential person in the room is often the one who says the least, but watches the most, learns the most, feels the most. Speak less, win more. Because winning, in this game of human hearts, is not about conquest. It is about connection. And connection is never forced. It is felt. And once you understand this, once you truly grasp that attention is the new affection, that presence is the modern proof of care, you begin to lead not with authority, but with attunement. You begin to realize that the best way to influence someone isn't to convince them of your brilliance, but to create a space so honest, so accepting, so grounded, that their own brilliance has room to emerge. You become the mirror they didn't know they needed. Not the kind that distorts, or flatters, or interrogates, but the kind that simply reflects them back to themselves, without judgment, without noise. You become a still pool of water in a frantic world, and in your stillness, people see the truth of who they are, and sometimes, for the first time, they do not look away. This is not about charm. This is not about strategy. This is about becoming the kind of person who values sincerity over spectacle, who understands that dignity lies not in the volume of your speech, but in the weight of your silence, who knows that one moment of deep human recognition is worth more than 1,000 shallow compliments. When you speak less, you allow others to rise. When you ask better questions, you give others the gift of insight. When you listen with no agenda, you become unforgettable, no because you spoke into their life, but because you made space for their life to speak. That kind of value cannot be faked. It is cultivated. It is cultivated in the way you honor people when they think they're not worth honoring, in the way you slow down when everyone else speeds up, in the way you choose depth over dominance, nuance over noise, kindness over control. And make no mistake, people feel this, even if they never say it, especially if they never say it. They remember how your presence made them feel more human, more grounded, more alive. They may not remember your words, but they will remember your attention. They may not remember your advice, but they will remember your warmth. They may not remember your ideas, but they will remember the peace that your presence brought. This is how you win without needing to win. This is how you lead without needing a title. This is how you influence without raising your voice. Speak less. But when you do, let your voice be full of meaning. Let it be the sound that breaks through the noise. Let it be the moment someone finally feels understood. And until then, let your silence be the sermon. Let your gaze be the gesture. Let your presence be the proof that there is still such a thing as authentic care, that there is still power in listening, that there is still strength in stillness. Because in the end, the most powerful people are not the ones who speak the most. They are the ones who make others speak more truthfully. You don't need to outshine anyone. You only need to illuminate them. And when you do that, genuinely, consistently, and quietly, they'll never forget you. And so we arrive not at the end of a speech, but at the birth of a deeper understanding. Influence was never about volume. Power was never about dominance. Connection was never about charisma. The ones who change us the most are not always the loudest. They are the ones who saw us when we didn't know how to be seen. The ones who listened while we figured out what we were trying to say. The ones who made space for our truth without needing to fix, judge, or label it. You don't need to chase impact when you are the impact. You don't need to rehearse significance when you live with significance. You don't need to impress when you already inspire simply by showing up fully, quietly, sincerely. Your stillness becomes a sanctuary. Your restraint becomes respect. Your silence becomes the sacred permission others needed to hear themselves again. So speak less because your peace is already speaking. Win more because your presence already won hearts long before your words ever arrived. And when the crowd fades, when the applause dies down, when the lights go dark and you're alone with your own soul, remember, you never had to shout. You only had to care. And when you care truly, deeply, invisibly, they won't just remember what you said. They'll remember who they became in your presence.